Welcome to today's webinar, Managing Your Finances When You're Receiving the Part Pension. Your presenter today is Nicola Beswick and I'm your facilitator, Nicola Graham. So we like to start our programs with an acknowledgement to country. So we acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians past and present on whose lands we meet today. And we acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country and respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Nicola Beswick to you today. And just a little bit of information about Nicola. Nicola's a financial advisor, mentor, confidant who empowers people to create a financially certain future free from stress and uncertainty. And a bit about Nicola's background. She studied science at the University of Otago. She realised she needed to swap out of the lab coat for a career that had more human interaction. So she moved into intellectual property law and threw off her science background and became a patent attorney. And then Nicola's father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when he was 55. That gave Nicola cause to pause and reconsider her career and perhaps a contribution that she could make for the greater good. And it highlighted the importance of financial education and structure so people can plan for the future and the unexpected hurdles. So Nicola said goodbye to her legal career and became a financial planner. In mid-2019, she became involved as an advisor in the Pro Bono Financial Advice Network, which is PFAN. And PFAN specifically provides advice to individuals who've experienced a health crisis. And she was subsequently elected director in late 2019. As you can see from the slide here, since entering the world of finance, Nicola's has become a certified financial planner, accredited aged care professional, and SMSF specialist advisor, that's self-managed super funds. Nicola is currently undertaking a Master's of Financial Planning. She works with all types of clients in a range of situations and circumstances and portfolio sizes to ensure they're working towards a life that they desire and deserve. So as I said, please pop any questions in. We'll answer the ones that we can. If any ones are more detailed and require more detailed advice, then Nicola can take those offline. I'll make sure those details are passed over. Okay, so there was just a note there about informed choice.
Thank you so much for the introduction today. It's an absolute pleasure to be speaking again to the community. As Nicola's indicated, we're today talking about how to manage your finances when you're receiving a part age pension. So we'll run through a specific case scenario for you to understand. So as Nicola also alluded before, I'm here talking on behalf of the Pro Bono Advice Network, and our mission is to connect financial advisors with people who are undergoing a financial hardship or a health crisis and provide some support on a pro bono advice perspective in order to create that stability for people's financial well-being and security. As Nicola's already introduced who I am and my background, and this is my nice little kind of cancel note, sorry, just trying to get that screen moving. So I work in an organisation called FMD Financial. We're a professional practice with the FPA, and I am a senior financial advisor there, and a list of my lovely qualifications you can see. Now, today we're very much running through a fictitious scenario, and this is the beautiful general disclaimer that we all have to do whenever we're presenting anything. If there's anything specific that you want to discuss or think that what we talk about today is important to you, please don't do anything by yourself, please connect with us through the Pro Bono Advice Network and we'll help guide you through your situation. It's very much, the world of finance has a few nuances there, and it's really important to be able to get the professional advice in order to make sure you're not compromising your situation. The most important reason that I'm here today is because of this lovely man here. This is my dad, Ron, and he was diagnosed with MS at the age of 55. He was one of these great people that fortunately had an income protection insurance policy in place, and that meant that he could stop work and manage his health scenario and finances without having to worry too much about things. So he's the reason why I'm sitting here in front of you today, talking about things that you could potentially do to maximise your situation. So today's webinar, we're very much going to focus on a couple of key points. I'm going to highlight how financial planners can assist you and assist people generally through that typical financial planning life cycle that we see. But we know that life is not always smooth sailing, and very much 2020 has shown that there can be a few challenges thrown up. So I'm going to take that typical life cycle and introduce to you a person named John. Now, John is built from a scenario from someone that came through MS Connect. Now, everything is been changed in terms of names and ideas, but it gives you an idea of how John's financial planner assisted him go from A to B. So we'll talk about that in specific detail. And in relation to today, we know that John was receiving Part Age pension, which is a key focus. So how do financial planners help people? What we do is we specifically listen to who you are, where you're at from a financial perspective, and where you want to go throughout that journey, regardless of where you are and what your money or situation is like. We develop a plan that connects your current situation with your goals. We look at various things such as retirement planning, investment planning, accumulating wealth, and reviewing your tax situation to ensure that you can minimise what you're doing. We can't complete tax returns, that's what accountants are for, but we help with the broader range. In addition to not completing tax returns, which is specifically for accountants, there's other things that we can't do. For example, create wills or power of attorneys. That is very important documents to have in place, and there are specialised estate planning lawyers out there that can help with that. Also, financial counsellors, they help with negotiating creditors and structuring debt repayments. So they also play a very important role in managing someone's overall financial situation wherever they may be. Everyone's generally connected, and good professionals have wide-ranging networks that you can refer people to. When we look at today's way of life, there's these general kind of stages that we go through. In our 20s through to our kind of 50s, so our working life, we're creating our wealth, we're getting set up, we're working towards raising and having a family, and nearing the end of our working life. When we approach retirement, that becomes very important, because you want to make sure that you've got the funds there to be able to get you through that retirement years. So that's when you start drawing down on the wealth that you've accumulated throughout your essentially your working life. This is, if things go and normal as we expect, but we know that doesn't necessarily happen. So what do you do when life does unexpectedly take a turn? And I know that everyone listening today may have experienced something one way or another, and that's what we're really focusing on today. You may have already heard some of the previous webinars that we have presented. We talked through a different set of situations around people who may be younger. So recently we talked about a gentleman by the name of Mike. He was a younger man, was renting. We had Mary, and she recently had to stop work and had her husband that was the sole caregiver, and also had to reduce his working hours. So we talked about these structures. And then Debbie, who was separated, and we had to structure her affairs in a particular way to maximise her position from a wealth perspective. Today we're talking about John. So John is one of these older gentlemen. He lives on his own, has his own home, and when he came through MS Connect, he really wasn't sure whether he should see a financial planner or not. Now, he said that he is obviously a little bit older and receives the age pension and lives by himself. His MS was stable, but it did prevent him from using a bit of public transport, and so that was really a key concern of his. You could see, through these years, it's about making sure that there's enough funds to be able to get through the retirement years. And we know that things can crop up, particularly with MS and how that may manifest itself throughout time. So a couple of key facts about John, and this is what we start off from a financial planning perspective, looking at their basic scenario. We know John is 68 years of age, making him a little bit younger already. He's retired, and his sole income comes from the age pension. He has no liabilities, he owns his own home, and his financial assets, he indicated that he didn't have enough money, but it turned out that he had a little bit of savings there. So he had about $250,000 worth of money just sitting in an ordinary savings account. So these are the key things. So taking that set of facts and looking at John's scenario, there are a couple of key things that the financial planner ran through. So a couple of things we know from previous webinars that, and from ordinary life, cash flow, income and expenses is the most important thing there. And getting an understanding of how much money you have coming in and what's going out is key. So that first key thing for John, understanding the assets that he has and making the most of what he has accumulated to date. We know based on John's age and stage of life that his personal risk insurances aren't necessarily a consideration, so we put that to one side and detail through other things that are important. So coming back to the estate planning documents that we know are important for everyone and any situation. So the first thing we've got to look at is what's John's cash flow and what is his balance sheet. So essentially, we know from this scenario that John doesn't have any debt, so his assets are that $250,000 sitting as cash in the bank. Based on that, we know that John's income, small amount of interest from that money in the bank. We know, particularly at this point in time, with interest rates being at record low levels for a very long time now, that's what he's getting from income from that cash in the bank is not really a lot. So his primary source of income is from the Centrelink age pension. Now, we'll also explore those two things in particular. John wasn't sure what his expenses were. Money came in, it went out. He knew he was drawing a little bit on that cash in the bank that he had, so we could see that being depleted, particularly with the expenses. But to put the expenses into equation, if you don't necessarily know what you're living off, there are certain standards or benchmarks that are out there. Now, this is a survey that is done by an independent organisation, the ASFA, and they put out what we call a retirement standard in the world of financial planning that breaks up singles and couples and how much money they need to be able to live in order to have a modest lifestyle or a comfortable lifestyle. Now, these are important things around, really those luxuries. And so you can see this is factual, and you can see the information or the data on that web link that I've provided there. But going back to John's situation before, if I go back, you can see his total income was $27,000 a year. That puts him just in that modest lifestyle category for a single retirement. Now, this doesn't take into account any additional healthcare issues that may come up, and we know particularly someone with MS, their need for ongoing healthcare and support can be quite variable depending on things. So John's income, just on the face value, meets that retirement modest living lifestyle. It doesn't provide for a lot of luxuries or anything else. So this is the key thing that we needed to look at for John, is that income component. The first thing we want to make sure is John is maximising his Centrelink entitlements. Now, as you may know, both the age pension and the disability support pension look at, from a financial perspective, two tests, the asset test and the income test. And depending on what of those two tests provides the lowest payment, that is how much someone will receive from a pension payment perspective. So to recap what the amounts are, so currently for a single person, they can receive just under $945 a fortnight, or a couple for a full age pension can get $711 per fortnight. So that is each. Now that includes the supplements that the government also provide. A member of a couple who may be separated because of illness, they go on the single rate of the pension. Now, it would be great if everyone could get the full pension, but again, like I just indicated, it doesn't work as nicely as that. We have to look at the particular tests. So the asset test, what it does is it looks at the total value of someone's assets, and it looks at where that value of the assets are within certain thresholds. Every $1,000, and this is very much a benchmark that we use, every $1,000 in total assets from the lower threshold reduces someone's pension by $3 until that upper point is reached. So what are these figures? You can see here, these are the current asset test figures for someone to go either on the full pension or get a little bit of part pension. So for John, we know that he is a single homeowner, and in order for him to get the full age pension under the asset test, he needs to have at least or below $268,000. Now, to get the part age pension, so that's almost $1 worth of age pension, $583,000. So that's how much someone can have before they stop getting the age pension. And for those that may not be a single homeowner, I've articulated there what the figures are currently for couples and those separated by illness. But asset test is not the only thing that we have to look at. We've got the income test as well. And again, this is based on a threshold amount. So we have someone who we look at their fortnightly pension decreasing by 50 cents in the dollar for any excess income they earn. And that's 25 cents for a member of a couple. The thresholds that we look at for the income test, now slightly trickier compared to the asset test where it's dollar for dollar, where different types of income are counted in a different way. So for example, employment income is counted dollar for dollar. Things like cash in the bank, so if we think about John's scenario, that's based on a deemed amount, or essentially an amount the Centrelink determine that money to earn. But from the purposes of what we really want to know is what are the qualifying points for someone's age pension. For John, we know, again, single, it doesn't matter on his home ownership status. To get the full wage pension, he has to have $178 to be able to get, or less from an income test perspective, to get the full age pension. Up to that, above $2,000 a fortnight in order to retain part pension. So a little bit of a recap around the income and the assets test that we're looking at there. But what does this mean for John? So if we put this scenario of John's situation into our calculation, we know that based on the assets that he's got $250,000 worth of cash in the bank, some contents, and he still owns a motor vehicle, so we've got a notional amount there as well. I can see based on that formula that his total assets is just below the lower threshold of $268,000 in combined assets by $3,000, so just on the borderline there. So he still is entitled to receive the full age pension per fortnight based on the assets test. Now, what we also need to do is look at the deemed income from that money in the bank. And I can see based on certain formula there that he's still within that lower threshold amount, and that still allows him to receive the full age pension from a Centrelink perspective. So looking at this, there really wasn't anything that we could do from a financial planning perspective to manage John's Centrelink entitlement. We know that based on his scenario and situation under the assets and the income test that he does qualify for the age pension and the full age pension, so we can't do anything there from him. But what else did we have in order to maximise John's income, particularly because we know that this is most important for anyone, regardless of their situation? So we know based on this situation, John has the $250,000 in the cash savings, and if we probably a little bit overestimated or underestimated from what you could get now per year, if it's earning 1%, that's only 2,500 a year. So if we look at his total income of $27,000, so from the full wage pension, and compare that to those living standards that we've got benchmarked, he's just on that modest lifestyle line. But you know, we certainly want to try and push or increase that income up, so he's got a little bit more flexibility in order to manage his expenses. So what can we do? This is where we have to look at how someone's got their money. Now, I noted that we still have cash in the bank for John, and this really comes back to the financial concept of diversification. So diversification is spreading risk around different types of assets, particularly in the financial planning perspective, and it means that you look at holding more than one type of investment in order to reduce the amount of risk that you have within your portfolio. So if we think about John, he's got all his money in one basket, being cash. And we know cash at the moment is not producing a very great level of income, which he is eating into in terms of his needs for expenses, and that is depleting quite rapidly. So what can we do in order to spread that risk around? And we look at this concept of diversifying John's asset base. And why would we want to diversify someone's asset base? It's because returns particularly can vary over time. Now, this is a very simple chart that looks at all the different types of asset classes that are out there in essentially the world of finance. And if you look at the return for cash, which is the fourth in the dark blue line, you can see the returns are very low compared to other asset classes. So for example, Australian shares, international shares, property investments, so forth. You can see the returns do vary over time. So again, by holding exposure to more than one asset class, so not just cash, this can automatically change the return profile of the money that someone's got. In this case, looking at that return of income for John, that is going to be the key focus of this scenario, not necessarily the movement in prices, which I know has been a big topic of conversation throughout 2020. So there's a couple of things first before you decide, okay, right, I'm going to put all my money, all my cash into Australian shares. Not quite as simple as that, because you've got to really not only look at that diversification piece, but you've got to also look at the level of return versus the level of risk that you want to take on. And return, which I think you've probably gathered by now, is around the amount of income or growth in someone's investments, where risk is the level of volatility or capital movement that someone feels comfortable with. So compared to John, where he's very, at the moment, everything is in cash, the expected return is quite low. So he would be down the scale a bit from that conservative pie chart, which is on that bottom left-hand corner. Cash, not quite a lot of return, but the expected risk, particularly from a capital movement or a price fluctuation, is quite low. You compare that to the top growth right-hand column chart, where you can see that if you've got more money or less money in cash and more money in shares, the expected return can be potentially a lot higher, but that level of risk is also quite high as well. And that is probably the one thing that people need to get very comfortable with, is understanding how much volatility or comfort around that capital movement someone is willing to take. And this is completely personal. There is no one answer is right, one answer is wrong. It all depends on someone's personal situation. And there are a number of ways that you can look at this from an investment perspective. You can look at having half your money stay more stable in the cash and fixed interest environment, with the other part a little bit more exposed to the growth side. And this is particularly the most important thing for when we're talking to John about what he wants with his scenario. He decided that he wanted to be a little bit more exposed to cash, have quite a bit of stability, but he realized the need that he needed to increase some or get some of his money to work for him. So after many conversations and many questionnaires, and they exist out there in terms of going through how to determine someone's appetite for risk, he came out following the discussions with his advisor that he was in this moderate investment risk profile. And what this meant was he liked having a little bit of stability, a little bit of exposure to growth. So approximately 35% in the share market there. And that's the part that moves and fluctuates up and down, but also produces, depending on the asset classes, and again, without going into too much detail, higher return. But he did have that need for stability, and he liked the conservativeness that cash and term deposits provided him. So it was very important in his scenario to look at making sure that we took that into account, that his need for that conservativeness and that fixed income was maintained within his portfolio, while looking at the options that could exist in order to increase the income with the potential for capital to grow. Now, that's not always guaranteed, and nothing when you start investing outside cash in the bank is guaranteed. And that's one of the most important things to take into consideration. And circling back to that, making sure you're not doing anything yourself and you do get advice. Coming back to John, you can see the green chart, on the chart there, you can see where he was currently, and all his money, 100% of it was in cash. We didn't have any exposure to any other asset classes, which is compared to that black line. Now, the black line is what, or bar charts, is what we ended up going into, roughly in order to give John that around 35% to other asset classes outside cash and money in the bank. And what this did for him was actually quite important from an income perspective. And this you can see on this table here. We went from having, before looking at this investment profile, $27,000 above in income, and that's managed to increase. And because we've got income from those investments that he's gone into, generating a higher level of return over and above just keeping that money in the bank for him. So he managed to get an additional $7,800 a year purely by putting some of that money that he had just sitting in an ordinary bank account into investment markets. And you can see how that really changes the level of income that he's getting from his portfolio. Now, income is only one part of the return profile from an investment perspective. The other part is capital movements. But what I really want to do is explore the strategy a little bit more in detail so you can get an idea of how this works from an investment perspective. You can see here by John increasing or adding that money to an investment portfolio, that his ability to have longevity from his funds became extremely different compared to keeping money in the bank. So that's green line. So this is the total amount of money that was invested, and you can see that the green line shows how quickly funds would run out based on his need for living by just keeping money in the bank and not really earning that amount of higher income, just chewing into the capital that he has, compared to relying on the wealth that he's accumulating from an income perspective from those investments. And you can see the capital on that blue line actually extends out for a lot longer. So you can really see the potential benefit that this had on a linear perspective, purely because the money that he had invested in other asset classes outside cash in the bank had the ability to generate a higher level of income, which helped his living expenses, but then also had the potential to increase in a return perspective from a capital movement perspective. And this is really how the strategy works. You have, if you think about it, your three different buckets. You have the bucket where you have your money for your everyday spending, and then you have your income, or where your money is being generated from to top up that extra income that you need for your everyday spending. Now that income, or bucket number 2, is continuously topped up through investments that are held in that shares or property perspective. So if you think about it in a simplistic way of bucket number 1 being your ordinary working bank account, and then buckets 2 and 3 being that profile, so that moderately investment profile that we had for John. So we have 65% of his money, the cash and fixed interest, in that bucket number 2, and then bucket number 3 are those shares and property. So that's where you've got a little bit more movement with volatility and capital fluctuations, but also potentially a higher level of income, which in this stage for John is the most important part for his scenario. Now, I know investing in the share market can be a little bit daunting, particularly because 2020, what we've just seen throughout this year, and anyone who watches the news and sees the ASX and the share markets around the world and the news that happens each day, it's about coming back to how much risk and volatility you want to take in, and remembering that, very much if we look at 2020, back this time last year, we were at that point record highs. Along came COVID, and share markets reduced in nature, but they have since come back, and a lot of investments are back to where they started, point to point, this time last year. So this is the part of the understanding around making sure that you are comfortable around being invested in the way that you want to, but also understand that the stock market does have this cycle. And here you can really see on this chart the times that we've had that shows stock market contractions and expansions. So you can see the global financial crisis there in the orange, and how it has declined from a stock perspective in the blue line, but it has also subsequently recovered. So again, this is coming back to making sure that you don't invest, and using John as an example, making sure that you're invested in a way that suits you and your tolerance. Because the last thing that you want to do, if I go back to the bucket slide, is sell down that growth bucket, because then that's going to compromise the whole strategy. So this is where talking to your financial planner becomes quite important around what you want to do from an investment perspective. So I hope that gives everyone today a little bit of an idea of some of the actions John and his financial advisor could do in order to increase the amount of income that he was receiving, because it is very important, particularly at any stage, is making sure that that cash flow is there, and any capital that you do have is maintained in a way that is comfortable for you, while meeting what you want to achieve from a goals perspective. It is a very subjective type of structure, and how you invest from an asset allocation, a risk perspective, the types of investments is very individual, and it's a question of making sure you understand what you have and where the money is, and managing that investment risk. That is the most important thing out of this whole equation for John, getting a little bit of extra income, but not having all of his money exposed to share markets, because he didn't feel particularly comfortable having the funds invested and being subjected to volatility in that way. Now, the other considerations that are particularly important for anyone when they're reviewing their affairs is estate planning. Having a up-to-date will, whether you're single, children, no children, whether you're in a couple, you've got this set up, and it's in a way structured in a way that is reflective of what your wishes are. And that's particularly important for power of attorneys. Now, power of attorneys become effective when someone's unable to make decisions, whether they're incapacitated for whatever reason. This gives someone the ability to make decisions on your behalf at that point. So, two very important documents to make sure that you have in place to ensure that when you pass away, regardless of who it is, that you've got your will in place, or if you're unable to make decisions, you've given someone the ability to manage the decision-making perspective on your behalf. Now, also one of the key things is situations change, our lives change, and that's particularly reflected in that life cycle that I showed earlier. So it's important to continuously get advice on an ongoing basis, or if advice or your life changes for whatever reason, because really the goals and objectives that you have maybe 5 years ago, upon a change of your situation or circumstance, may not be the same as what they are at that point in time. So really key to make sure that you connect with someone that you feel comfortable with managing your affairs, and you've got a plan that's moving as you move as well. So what I've done today is talk through how that personalised financial advice piece helped John, the retired man who had some money in the bank but knew he needed to increase his income a little bit more. As I have reiterated throughout this presentation today, everyone is different. There is no one size fits all, go ahead and do this. Please get advice. Please make sure that you consult with someone before you make any changes, particularly because there are a lot of nuances within particularly superannuation insurances that you want to make sure you're across the facts before you do anything further. Now, we are scheduled to have another webinar in 2021 where we will review a different scenario and a different perspective from an advice needs perspective. Now, before I leave you though, there's a couple of helpful tips to remember throughout anyone's situation. First thing, again, coming back to that cash flow. Know what your plans are, both your short term and your long term, and work out. I know a budget, yes, it's one of those words that's there and nobody really likes, but just simply understand what income you have coming in, where this comes from, and what expenses are going out. Can you change where your money's going, and are you getting the best deal on things? Interest rates on mortgages, for example, are the key one, with particularly the changes in interest rates these days. And look at your overall situation. Work out how long your savings may last you, and do you have to review this in some way? Now, do you want to look at making a plan for the future? What are the accessibility to superannuation, and when may you do this, particularly depending on anyone's situation with illness, and really understanding what particular insurances you might have in place, or do you need to get added insurance protection for your caregiver within your family? Because again, if something happens to a loved one who's looking after you, you don't want to necessarily be impacted with a compromising financial position on that basis as well. And creating that team of trusted advisors is probably the most important thing, and someone who you can get advice from. I know the people at MS Connect are very good with a range of different professionals there that help with pointing people in the right direction. It's very important that you can have those key people on your side in order to help you navigate whatever situation you're in. And that's where we come in from the Pro Bono Advice Network. We have a wide range of financial advisors who have registered the interest to provide pro bono advice to those coming through the MS aspect, and you can find further information on us through our website, which I've listed there. You can also email us through the details or give us a call through there. Now, we are linked through a couple of professional organisations that will help with managing that process. So please do reach out directly to us or to your support workers if you do need anything to talk about with your specific situation. And that is all for my presentation today. And I look forward to hearing any questions that you may have out there.
Thank you so much, Nicola. We lots of really great information for everybody, and a real reminder about how important it is to seek advice and how advantageous that can be for you. We have had a few questions, mostly of quite a personal financial situation in nature,
Yep.
Nicola. So I've taken consent from people to pass their details on to you. So I'll do that so that you can help them offline from here. So, and the other questions we had, you answered as we went along, so that was perfect. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen again now. So big thank you, Nicola. Really appreciate you donating your time to us and your expertise. It's really appreciated. And I'm just going to finish off everybody with some housekeeping to close off, and quite a few thank yous have come in, Nicola, from our attendees as well, so thank you for that. So just a reminder to everybody that the gateway to all of our services is through MS Connect on 1800 042 138 or via the email, as you can see. And some of the services, very briefly, that we offer through MS Connect, some great reasons to call us. You can reach directly a nurse advisor, a social work advisor, an MS expert, etc. And reminder about our peer support. You can connect with somebody in a very similar situation to yourself who's living well with MS, and again you can access this service through our MS Connect number. We have a wonderful tool online to help symptom management. It's called Get Your Act Together. We've got employment support services for people to help you stay in work or find new work. We are a registered NDIS provider, providing different services in different locations. Just a note there about My Aged Care and some contact details there, should that be of interest to you. We've also just launched this year a fantastic range of podcasts. We've got a new series starting, which is Inspiring Lives from people who've got MS and are doing some really interesting things. So encourage you to have a listen, have a look, lots of different podcasts there. So just finishing up with our contact number again, and to ask you to please complete a really short survey, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. So take care. Lovely to share some time with you today. Big thanks to Nicola again, and see you again soon. Bye for now.